problems are all mental problems because it's how we think about things. And how we think about things is what we then do, right? So environmental problems are mental problems. And I realized if I want to save nature, I have to work with people.
You're listening to Climate Curious, a podcast for people who care about the world but find the current conversation about climate change confusing, boring, or scary.
Hello, Ben.
Oh, hey.
Hi. So we
How you doing?
We were off being curious last week. We're back.
Right, we had a massive break.
Massive.
A huge, gargantuan-sized break.
Did you do anything curious this past week?
I don't know what that question means. What do you mean when you're asking me, did I do anything curious? You mean anything climate curious?
Maybe.
In my
or
podcast voice.
Just in general. I'll tell you something that I did was curious. I have this, because I'm stuck in London now for the holidays. Mm-hmm. I've decided to make sure I get to go to all the parks in central London. Because I've never done that before.
That's a good move.
And I went to Holland Park this past week.
Where is Holland Park?
In Holland Park.
Not in Holland.
No.
In Holland Park, the area. Yeah. So Holland Park, the park is in Holland Park, the area.
Yeah, I mean, shocking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
It's very rarely that accurately named, but Holland Park, the park, is in Holland Park, the area. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's beautiful. No. And they have peacocks.
Oh, I've heard about this park. Isn't that an infamous park for having peacocks? And there's another one that's got flamingos or something.
Yeah, I mean the flamingo one. There is one that has flamingos, which I have not yet seen. But they have like so wild roaming peacocks.
Oh, that was such a good way to be curious through a break.
Yeah.
I'm going to go and see some peacocks.
Well, I didn't know. I thought I was just going to go for like a nice walk in the winter in lockdown and ended up in this beautiful little garden. So it was great.
Do you live close to the park?
No. I have rented a car for 3 months to get me through lockdown. An electric car.
Yeah. Climate curious.
Yeah, to link back to our second episode, an electric car for a car that I don't drive. So obviously for the people in my family who do.
Right.
And part of the job is to go and see all these different things. So actually I was, the other thing I do is I go out to East London to this bakery that I love to pick up bread. Ooh. And the reason why that's relevant is because the last time I got to do that was right before lockdown. The first one started in March.
Wow, that was a long time ago.
When I was visiting the offices of our guest this week.
Oh, that was a nice segue.
Did you see that?
Oh, what a professional. Wow.
Yeah, that was like
This is what podcasting sounds like, guys, just in case you didn't know.
So I don't have a smooth segue into this topic, just to say that I'm a bit of a geek and I love the law, even though I'm not a lawyer.
Okay.
And I have loads of lawyers in my life. And I've always been so impressed with how the law can be used to bring about like social justice. That's how I always knew it to be done, you know? And so when I found out about the work of our guest this week, it was just mind blowing for me. I hadn't really heard of this kind of work being done before. And I thought to myself, like, this is just very powerful to show how there are all these systems and institutions in society that we can actually utilize to bring about like the kind of future we want, even when we don't necessarily immediately see it. And it was very cool to me that there are people out there who've been thinking about this for like a really long time and doing this work. And basically, Ben, I was just very excited for you to hear about this work because I thought you'd find it pretty cool as well.
Ooh, this is fun. This is going to be a fun one then.
And so I think very much similar to Krista Mayer, who we had a few weeks back, who was talking about neuroscience and where the link was not maybe immediately relevant or obvious, let's say, to the listener. People might not be sure how law might be relevant to this. And I definitely think they'll be surprised as how it's been used. So let's get started. Let me introduce our guest and then let's dive into it, shall we?
Okay, go for it.
Okay, so James Thornton is the founding CEO of an NGO called ClientEarth, which he launched in 2007. So he's been doing this work for quite a long time. And we're going to get into the details of what ClientEarth does, but it uses like advocacy and litigation and research to address climate change, basically, and nature loss around the world. And I mean, James is a pretty cool guy. And he's got a book out, which he co-authored with his husband, Martin Goodman. And that's called, I think it's called ClientEarth. He'll tell me. It is called ClientEarth. Good. Which is about the story of, ClientEarth since it was founded. And I guess the other cool thing is to say that the new Statesman named him as one of the 10 people who would change the world. So...
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So we're in.
Sorry, not that is the validation for you as a person.
It's like years and years of being a lawyer, and then it's just this one list.
I'm like, oh my gosh, the new Statesman. Wow.
Oh, so let's get into it, shall we, Ben?
Yeah, let's jump in.
Hi, James. Thanks for joining us.
A pleasure. Great pleasure.
James, that's so cool. you're one of the 10 people to change the world. That's amazing. Well, also all the work that you're doing sounds amazing. I feel like I want to like the way that my mind works is I have to like start from the very beginning and then build the picture all the way up to really understand a thing. So what is, and I do know the answer, but I feel like maybe some people won't, and also I don't really know the answer. So what is an NGO?
So it's a charity, basically. So a non-governmental organization, so all the charities that are helping people, basically.
Okay. And so ClientEarth is your NGO that you started.
Yeah.
And you've written a book by the same name that tells us the story. I feel it almost feels rude to ask someone to tell me the story when they've written a book. I feel like I should just go and buy the book and read it. But can you give me like a brief overview of what ClientEarth is and how it came into existence? Where did it come from? What was it? How did you birth it?
Yeah, well, first of all, the name. I had done this kind of work in the US where I was using law to save the environment and people's health. And then I came to Europe because the guy who became my husband couldn't stay on that side because human rights laws weren't so good. So we came here. And then I looked around and I thought, I'll just work with one of the big environmental groups like WWF or Greenpeace or something. And I met the people who ran them, and they basically weren't using lawyers. And that was amazing to me. So I thought, let's see if we can set up an organization of a charity where lawyers come together and work on behalf of people on the planet. And then the question was, what should we name it? So... and I came up, I thought, I'm pretty good at naming things, I've got a good PR kind of sense. So I came up with a list of names, and then since everything's on the internet, I would put them in, and they were all taken. And some of my favorite ones were taken by sewage companies in Florida, which have wonderful environmental names, but if somebody's got it, they've got it, right? So we were walking down the beach, and Martin turned to me and he said, "You seem bummed out." And I said, "Yeah, I can't name this thing." He said, "Well, okay, so you're a lawyer." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Who's your client?" And I said, "That's really easy. My client is the Earth and everybody who lives on her." And he said, "That's the name, ClientEarth." And I said, "Well, somebody's got that. Some sewage company in Moscow must have that one." So we went back to the motel, and I looked it up, and it was the only thing I've ever Googled that came back 0. And I said, this is fate. So we called it ClientEarth. And it really does kind of suggest it,
That's like a gold mine of branding, isn't it? When you Google something and nothing comes up.
Well, it suggests what we're trying to do, which is, you didn't know that you were our client. Right. But here we are, we're trying to stop climate change and protect nature and, protect people's health, like reduce air pollution in London where you're living. And we're doing all those things. And they all add up to one, huge package of trying to reduce pollution, reduce climate change, protect nature, protect people.
So cool. When did you decide that you were going to become a lawyer? Is that the right thing to call you, a lawyer?
Yeah, it sure is. It was a long time ago, and I didn't originally want to become a lawyer. I mean, I'm actually not too keen on law itself. Maryam very kindly said she was very interested in law or lawyers. I've never been particularly interested in either one, but I'm very interested in what you can do with it, that because law is so powerful. So I thought I was actually going to originally become perhaps a biologist or a philosopher, but I studied biology.
Oh, wow.
And then I thought that once I studied biology, I realized that nature was going to start going down like that, and I could spend my whole life studying things I loved and watching them disappear. And my father was a law professor.
Oh my gosh.
So lawyering was in the family. He was a law professor. And environmental law didn't exist. I went to law school a long time ago. I couldn't study environmental law at New York University. But I became a lawyer. And then I found a way to use it. And it turns out to be enormously powerful, because there are these huge levers in the law that you can move and get things done.
Wow. So the climate stuff, not climate, but like biology, was something that you'd studied already and was like a natural tie-in to. Yeah. Because I think the point that I'm getting to now in my mind in these conversations about climate change is a point where I'm starting to understand that, like, regardless of who people are, everybody's got a role to play, and everybody's got something that's pretty unique that only they can do, that combines like their interests and their passions and their desires or whatever it might be. And so it sounds like law was like almost like a pathway for you to do the thing that you wanted to do.
Yeah, well, it was, because what I wanted to do was to protect nature, and then since law was in my family, I knew it was a powerful thing, and I thought, well, I'll become a lawyer and see what's possible, and then it became possible to use it very, very powerfully. But what I wanted to do is to protect nature, and I didn't originally want to protect people, because I was quite pissed off at people, because people were making all the problems, right? And it took years and years and years. But one day when I was in a Zen retreat, many years later, I felt I had this very strong experience where I realized that I had been thinking that people were going to kill all life on Earth. That's why I was so angry. And I realized in this retreat that even if we did our worst, we're not going to take down all life on Earth. We could take ourselves down. We could take a lot of species down, but life would go on. And that doesn't seem like an enormously powerful revelation when I put it that way, but it was for me. And I relaxed and I said, "Oh, wonderful! We can't kill all of life on Earth." And I started thinking, so what's my job then? What do I do? And the answer was, if people are causing the problems, I need to work with people. Oh, and if people are causing the problems, it's because they don't know what they're doing. So I found myself suddenly getting extremely fond of people, which was a big change. I'd been very angry, and then I started thinking, oh, okay, I need to take care of people and not just nature. And the next bit was, environmental problems are all mental problems. Because it's how we think about things. And how we think about things is what we then do, right? So environmental problems are mental problems. And I realized if I want to save nature, I have to work with people.
I feel like that's a really intelligent way of phrase. Like, that's such a branding masterclass, environmental problems and mental problems. But also, there's a theme, like a recurring theme of not actually wanting to work with people. I feel like that's quite a social justice worldview mindset. Do you know what I mean? People are kind of secondary to solving problems.
Yeah.
It just means so much, James, that you went through this and you're talking about it, because I think one of the things I've struggled with so much in coming into this space and trying to understand the people that work in it and understanding why I've come to this so late. I think it's because I was always really put off by this idea of blaming people. This idea that, people are the problem, and if we could just get rid of people, everything would be fine. And I never understood it, because I always thought to myself, well, actually, the world will be fine. The world will be here. If we screw it all up, we're just screwing it up for ourselves. Then the kind of planet will continue. And I think it's so interesting that you had this realization. And did it change your work when you had this moment?
Yeah, sure. First of all, it was quite empowering, because I could just stop being angry at everybody and realize they were all my brothers and sisters, and I wanted to work with them, and I wanted to help them figure out how to have better lives. And then I also wanted to protect them. So the very first big thing we did in the UK after setting this up was to bring an air pollution case. Because people are really, really impacted by air pollution. I wanted to show that citizens could bring a case against government and win, but it had to be about something important. So I picked air pollution because 40,000 people a year in the UK die early of air pollution. And it's very much a social justice issue because everybody gets hit by air pollution. But the poorer you are, the more you're hit by it because you'll be living in a neighborhood where there's more air pollution. It's as simple as that. So if you want to do something, if I had one case to bring, which is what I had at the beginning, where I could demonstrate that citizens could actually sue the government and win, that would do something really big for people's health, but would also begin to address this social justice issue. Then it was air pollution, and we won. And then we won all over the EU, and so we're working on that. But the other thing that it did change for me was the idea of how do you bring people into at the center of your concerns, and it is very easy to fall into the trap that you were mentioning, Maryam, as I did myself, of people with a problem, got to get rid of them, or got to move them aside, or got to ignore them. But it won't work that way. First of all, no one will join you if you put up a flag saying, I hate all of you. That not many people are going to join your party,
Right.
And you want a big party. This has got to be a big party. So that's a really important aspect. And then we started looking for, and I did, how can you work with communities, for example? So all the work we do in Africa we work in 5 countries there on forestry, trying to protect forests, and it's been a big learning for me because the way you do that. So I hired a bunch of human rights lawyers to join who had experience working in Africa, and the way you do it is by working with communities that depend on the forests. So we started building networks of African NGOs. Who were interested in forest and interested in the communities that depended on them. And then we started connecting up African lawyers and all sitting together thinking, how can we deal with this? And again, it's a real teaching for me, in that it's quite clear that you're not going to be able to save the world's forests in the Amazon, Africa, Southeast Asia, without empowering the people who actually live in the forests. That's the best thing you can do to save forests. You got to do a lot of other things too, but that's the most important thing. So it's a very good example of how working with people, and also people who have been marginalized, is a way of taking care of the planet.
That's so cool. Do you? Can I ask you like it's a bit of a tangential question, but a really genuine question. Do you ever feel scared? Like the idea, I've been watching like a lot of like there's a series called Mr. Robot, which is about like hackers and
I know that one. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So and I've like, it put me in this really weird place of like conspiracy theories over the first lockdown. But I like the idea of like fighting the government and winning, to me feels like a really scary concept, like a really scary space to inhabit and to live in, especially if that's like doing that over and over again is your work. Does it ever feel like overwhelming or scary or like anything like that, or is it just part of the course?
Well, no, I don't actually, and I don't feel scared. But I'll give you a couple of interesting stories. So one of the things we did, so we're talking about climate change, today, and I always start with science. So if the Earth is your client, then as a lawyer you're supposed to talk to your client. So if Maryam's my client, I have to sit down with her and say, what's your issue, what's your problem, what's your feeling? But if the Earth is your client, how are you going to do that with the Earth? And the answer I came up with is science.
Right.
Because the science can tell us, okay, what does the Earth need in terms of taking care of nature and taking care of climate? And right early on, when we only had like 4 people, scientists were saying, if there's only one thing you could do to stop climate change, that you could do to stop climate change personally, would be to prevent all new coal-fired power stations from being built in Europe, because coal is enemy number 1, and why don't you just stop all the new coal-fired power stations? And I said, okay, we've got like 4 people, but we can do that.
You said, okay.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll get going on that. So we got going on that. And one of the things to do there was then to create an office in Poland, because more than half of all the new ones were going to be built in that country. I said, okay, so if we're going to do this, we have to find Polish colleagues and create a Polish institution. We did that, and then we started by suing 14 huge investments in coal-fired power stations, these 14 vast things. And the government was totally hot on coal. At that point, they got like 90% of their electricity from burning coal.
Oh, wow.
And this was a country that was just like in love with it. You know, as it was like maybe 100 years ago in the UK,
Right.
where everything depended on coal. But that's where their mindset was still at. And when you talk to people in Poland, as I would go around and meet people to learn things, you know, have all these conversations, so many times I heard people say the phrase, coal, our national treasure. I
wow.
just kept hearing that, right? Hundreds of times. And I thought, wow, this is a cultural situation. So anyway, we brought these cases, and then the head of the office, so we hired these great Polish people to do this work and worked with them. And the head of the Polish office started getting these death threats. Because we had been, the treasurer, what would have been the minister of the treasury, had a press conference, and he denounced us as being enemies of the state for opposing all these new coal-fired power stations. And then I never got any threats, but the head of our office started getting these death threats where he had two phones, and one was a phone for everybody, and he had a separate phone that only his mother, his brother, and his wife had the number. I didn't have it. And the threats came on that phone in the form of, it would ring and he would pick it up and he would hear AK-47s firing.
Oh my gosh.
And that's pretty clear Mr. Robot type threat, right?
Yeah.
So, but these Polish people are tough. So I asked him, so does that frighten you? How are you coping with that? And he said, well, it frightens me a little bit. Yeah, it kind of frightens me, but not a lot. I said, really? And he said, no, if they really wanted to frighten me, it wouldn't have been on the phone. They would have taken me out and broken my legs. Then I would have been frightened. And I thought, my God, these are strong people. But so you do encounter some of that, but it's surprisingly little, really. And it's partly where you work. If you were working in the Democratic Republic of Congo or in another country where they're really, you can't protect anybody, then that would be tough. But working in the countries you do, even China, it's all great. And in China in particular, this is another one. Here we're working on the side of the government. It's very interesting because when a government wants to do the right thing, and in China they want to do the right thing about the climate and the environment for sure. On that issue, they are world leaders. Then what happens is if you come along and you know what you're doing, and you can bring world-class help to them to accomplish the ambition, then I've been surprised by how quickly things can go. And we do that sometimes at the European Commission level, at the level of countries, and and China is a good example of that. But also companies are now coming, interestingly, and saying, we see the handwriting on the wall in terms of climate change. What should we be doing? And in particular, what should we be doing so you don't sue us? And that's a good question, I'm always happy to tell somebody. You want it to be that way, right? Because it's a lot easier if they say, what do you want me to do so you don't sue me? And then you say, well, you should do X, Y, and Z. And that's a lot more efficient than having to sue them.
It seems, James, almost like you spent the first part in these kind of big David and Goliath battles. And now, actually, because of those successes, the tables have turned a bit. Will you tell us a little bit about those early successes? I mean, you mentioned Poland, like what happened there?
Yeah, finish the story about Poland. What happened?
Right.
This is so interesting.
Well, it's actually a continuing story. But so we won those cases. So those and a whole new generation of coal fire, and there were 26, I think, new other ones that were going to come behind that they wanted to build. So we picked off the 14 that they were just about to break ground for, and these are huge things, and huge investments. And so we won those, and we started winning them. And then by the time we won all of those, the other ones have just kind of disappeared into the background. So by winning all of those initial cases, again, you change the terms of the debate. And, I was telling you how hostile the climate in the country was to us and to this work. And our Polish colleagues did a very skillful job. So they found a reporter who was a really trusted journalist in the country and hired him. And then he was able to spend his full time talking to all the other journalists, saying, I know these people, they're patriots. They're the ones that are interested in your children's future because they're trying to make a clean future with good energy. So they're actually really the people to watch. And after about 3 years of quite a lot of work in that regard, it changed the tone. So when the Treasury Secretary denounced us, the main newspaper for business also denounced us. My colleagues were in the Supreme Court of Poland and wearing their suits and ties. And the newspaper said they were eco-terrorists. And I thought, wow, eco-terrorists in suits and ties saying, Your Honor, I may you please consider this. It's a strange kind of eco-terrorism. But anyway, 3 years later, after all of the discussions with all of these groups in Poland and the help of this good journalist on staff, the same paper that was denouncing us as eco-terrorists asked the head of the office, could you write an op-ed piece showing us your thoughts on what the clean and climate beneficial energy future for Poland is. And that was a huge cultural shift within 3 years. Now, you never win anything in 3 years. So most recently in Poland, two more things. One is that the government decided it was going to build one more coal plant. And they were actually calling it the last new coal-fired power station in Europe, which I took as a real compliment, because we'd killed all the other ones in the whole continent. And so we said, we're going to try a new technique. Nobody's done this in the world. Let's do this. Let's not use environmental law. Let's use business law, finance. Just straight business law to try and stop a coal-fired power station. So we got an economist study to show that it was a bad investment to build a coal plant because some of the really great news for you to be sharing with all of the people who listen again and again, so everyone really gets it, is that renewable energy is now cheaper than fossil fuel to build. It's genuinely cheaper. We can get into that more if you like. But anyway, so we got an economic study in Poland saying it was a bad investment to build a coal-fired power station when you could build renewables for less money and generate clean energy forever. And then when the company didn't listen, we sued as shareholders. We spent 30 euros and bought shares. We went to court and we sued the officers and directors of the company personally.
Wow.
Which is, again, nobody had ever done that before. And our argument was, you are ruining our 30 euro investment by this bad decision to build a coal-fired power station. And believe it or not, we won in court.
James, you're literally just on a wind-up, aren't you? you are? That's so
it's good,
mad.
Isn't it? Yeah. It's so bad. And then the share price went up for the company. So the stock market actually loved what we did. They said, you're right. And the company was wrong. So the share price went up, which is a beautiful punchline. So that's one really cool gambit, And then the other one is, now that we've succeeded in keeping these things from being built, we're working hard on shutting them down. So that's the next stage. So you then need to shut down the existing ones. And the biggest of all, the gargantua in Europe is a place called Belchatau power plant. And it's the biggest emitter of greenhouse gases in Europe. And to give you a sense of the scale, it emits more greenhouse gases, that one power plant, than the entire country of New Zealand every year. So that's big.
Oh my gosh.
That's big. And it produces about 20% of the electricity for Poland. But it has to close, if we're going to save the climate and meet the Paris Agreement. So we sued. And the judge, a couple of months ago, made a decision in which she told the company to sit down with us and to negotiate a closing date for the company, for the power plant. So the company was instructed by the judge. And what she said was, look, climate change is now not just an issue for these plaintiffs. It's not just an issue for citizens, but it's an issue for the company, and it's an issue for the future of the company. So sit down and negotiate a closing date for Belchatau power plant. And, this is the kind of thing that I don't imagine happening 5 or 10 years ago. The people's awareness of the need for this kind of action is so far beyond what it was that it's very encouraging.
And I mean, that's just so incredible. And these battles that seem completely unwinnable, and then using the tool, the law, which everyone has access to, but it feels really creative the way that you're using it, James. It doesn't feel like, I guess, the way people might think the law is, which is, I guess, as you said, like in the suit and tie and very grey, but much, much more creative. Do you see this as a creative work?
Absolutely. No, and so I'm very comfortable with that. I mean, I'm also, in my, so the spectrum of my life includes being a violinist, being a poet, and being a Zen priest. So this is all, it's all another space of creativity for me, using law in this way. And then the question is, how do you, it's an unusual way to use law. But but it's like playing an instrument. You need to be really good at the scales, and you need to know what you're up to. But then you say, okay, so how do I do this? And in this case, the scientists say, stop coal-fired power stations or close down existing ones. And then how do you do it? I mean, there's no law that says you can't build a coal-fired power station. In fact, the deck is stacked from the old days in favor of people who want to do that. It used to be something that seemed like a good idea. So the system is still set up that way. So you have to say, how then do I do that? And that's a really creative enterprise, because you have to look around the entire field of law and say, what types of law can I use? And in this case, I was just telling you about where we stopped the last new coal-fired power station by buying shares and bringing a corporate case. No one had ever used basic corporate law and the basic duty of officers and directors to make sure your investment is well. And that was a really creative act, So always we're looking at using law creatively. I mean, and another thing that to be creative is so you want to imagine what the law should look like. So if you look ahead, and this type of work I think of as like playing 60 chess games at once, So you're looking ahead, you're scanning, you're planning, and so you want to also think what should the legal system look like if it's going to protect people, and then you work on changing the laws. And one of the really amazing things for me has been working in China, because I mentioned earlier, China really wants to clean up. They realize it's in their interest, or enlightened self-interest, to clean up. So they invited me in to help write a law so that citizens could sue companies that were polluting, including those owned by the government.
And China is a big deal, right, James? Like, just for those who maybe don't know, because I think we all hear about China in so many different ways, but if we were zeroing in on climate change, what does China mean in our fight? Like, just to give people that sense of it.
Well, yeah, you're right. Well, without China coming along, we don't win the climate fight. It's really that simple.
Why? Is that because it's so big?
China is the biggest emitter now of greenhouse gases. So it used to be the US, which is now number 2. It's now China. So, and China was on this growth curve of getting bigger and bigger with its emissions. So unless that were to change, we wouldn't get there. And the good news is that they really want it to change. So the president of China announced a few weeks back that they were going to reduce their carbon emissions before 2060 to what's called net zero, which means if you look at everything they do, that they wouldn't be emitting any greenhouse gases on balance. And that's an amazing thing, because they're going to have to really turn around their whole economy really fast. But they're committed to doing it. And then one of the interesting things was, so then they say, how do we do that? And then this is very creative, because then you have to think about how do you change a huge country's systems so that you can actually do the right thing.
And you've been, if I understand correctly, you've actually been helping the government build a legal system and train judges and lawyers and people, so they can almost, in some cases, sue the government, right? So they have those mechanisms in place. That seems that seems surprising.
Well, it seems surprising to me. I got invited in 2014 to give a seminar to a group of Supreme Court judges in China and the number 2 person at the Ministry of Environment and the head of the Environment Committee in the Congress. So really top people. And I had just your reaction. They said, you're here because you're the only person who's done this kind of work in Europe and America. So you must understand how it works, and we want you to help us design the system so that the same thing can happen. And I said, yes, happily, and there are 6 things you need to put in place. But, this is really a big change. This is revolutionary. And then there was a funny moment. The senior Supreme Court judge said, James, revolutionary is a big word for us, in China. And I thought, that was a beautiful cultural moment, and he said, it's a big change. So then I worked on that, and the idea was they thought that they needed citizens, NGOs in China, to be able to sue polluting companies in order to speed the cleanup. And they even said, look, we're aware that sometimes there's corruption out in the provinces. The further you get away from Beijing, the harder things are to control. And out in the provinces, things may be corrupt. And if citizens can bring cases requiring companies to clean up, that will act as a check on officials who aren't doing their work. I thought, this is beautiful. And then we worked on that. And I went back 3 months later to check in Beijing on it. And then again, the Supreme Court judge invited me to come back and train judges to decide cases well, because they had just created this amazing system of 3,000 environment court judges. 3,000 judges who were just dedicated to deciding environment cases. That doesn't exist anywhere else in the world.
Right.
But they wanted to speed things up, and they wanted to do things in a big way. So he actually said to me, what would you like to do next? Because we liked your work on the law that allows people to sue. And I said, well, these judges need training because this is all really new. And he said, well, absolutely. And would you train them? And I thought, me? Well, but you have to be entrepreneurial, right? So you have to say yes. So I said yes. And then we came back with experts from around the world and to train the judges and me and others. And we started training judges. And then the prosecutors came to us and said, in that law that you helped write, we, the prosecutors, as you know, got the right to sue the government for the first time over the environment. When they don't do what they're supposed to do, we can sue on behalf of the people. So, imagine the Ministry of Environment in Yunnan province is not cleaning up the water or the air. The prosecutors then could sue. But they came to us and they said, you sue governments all the time and beat them. We haven't done this before. Can you help us train to sue the Chinese government? And I thought, this is an amazing request from their federal prosecutors, right? This is like a new world we've entered here, a totally new world. So we said, of course. And by now we've trained like 1,500 judges and prosecutors. And the prosecutors, get this, have initiated more than 100,000 cases since we've been training them. More than 100,000 cases. And they're settling or winning almost every single one of them. So changing the whole balance of how companies and people in China have to take care of the environment. So can you get away with ignoring the law anymore? No. Could you 10 years ago? Yes. So again, a very rapid shift. And since it is the biggest polluter in the world, this is a really key piece for how we're going to solve these problems.
So this is literally, the New Statesman is not over-exaggerating in any way when they say that you're one of the 10 people who's changing the world, right? This is like unbelievably huge. I'm finding it really hard to put into words like how inspiring this conversation or just listening to you talk is, because like it actually in real time sounds like you, like it's not often you hear people talk and they're actually changing the world. Do you know what I mean? Like that's on a crazy scale of like impact, sitting down with presidents and like implement. And just out of interest, how big is ClientEarth now? So I think when you were talking about, was it Poland you were talking about, and you said there was 4 of you who then were starting to recruit other staff in Poland. What's the scale or the scope of the organization now?
Well, yeah, and I should be really clear. I don't do this stuff myself. I mean, it's
Right.
it's always a team, right? This is
Yeah.
team. And the team has gotten bigger. So we're now, I think last time I checked, almost 220 people. A very, very diverse group of lawyers from 26 countries and a total of like 110 of them. And then offices in London, Brussels, Berlin, Warsaw. We're working in 5 African countries. Then we have an office in Beijing. We're about to open an office in Singapore in the first quarter of next year. And that one is to take all this work on coal all the way across Asia. And like I was saying, we work, inside ClientEarth, it's always a team effort. But our team also always includes other citizen groups. So if we work in Bulgaria or any country, if we work, when we're working in Ghana, you're always working with groups of local people, and you're sharing knowledge, you're sharing passion, and sharing everything you've got in order to work together on a problem. And that's what we're going to do throughout all of Asia. So there are something like 1,600 coal plants in Asia right now. There are another 450 that are planned. We can't let those be built. And we have to shut down the existing ones if we're going to do a good job with the climate. So that's the next big project. And that's why I want to start this office in Singapore. And I now believe that it's possible to do, right? Because we've seen how well it works, And it's not just stopping coal. I mean, and this gets back to the social justice question, because that's really the key issue for all of this. The people in Asia who don't have any electricity are something like 350 million people. And if you have no electricity, you're condemned to poverty, really. I mean, it's the worst kind of poverty. You're out of the system. So the goal really is to not just stop coal, but the goal is to build a clean energy system. And we need to be always culturally sensitive and to flow like water into the different cultures and do what's appropriate, But that's what's so exciting, What do we got to learn by working in Indonesia or all these other countries? We're going to learn a lot, and we're going to share a lot and build something together with people.
And I think that's such an important point that you're making as well, in terms of as you said, like flowing like water into different cultures and working. I think it's like really important that the model that you've presented is one where you work with community groups wherever you're working. Like one of the questions that was coming up for me earlier when you were talking about the work that you were doing in Africa was that, how do you not just fall into the role of becoming a colonizer in that environment, where you're just the hero and saying, here's the way to do the thing. But I think like that's a really important piece in terms of social justice, of like working with people in those communities so that you're co-creating ways of reimagining and reinventing ways of doing climate change and climate justice. That's so amazing.
You're totally right about that, and in Africa it was a huge learning experience for me. So the number one thing we said to not go in as colonizers or post-colonial people was to not talk to the government. So instead we went in and we went around meeting the local groups and local lawyers, and then found a good local lawyer to hire in each country. And we found these brilliant lawyers, African lawyers, who became our person who was in charge of everything. Right. And then building these networks. And then we brought then we analyzed a lot of stuff and said, we think that in order to make like a land tenure system work, so who owns the forests, to make a system work, you need 6 rights. That's what we are thinking. And then we sat down with people and said, what are you thinking? And, if you agree with us, then let's, that you need these 6 rights, then teach us how these rights exist or don't exist in your country. Right. So that, mutual learning experience is then what produced some very beautiful results. And after about a year in a number of these countries, what happened is the government came to us and said, you seem to be getting along very well with these community groups. We don't. So, could you act as kind of a bridge between them and us? And we said, well, that would be great. And then working with the community groups, then we started proposing changes in the law, which then got accepted. And one of the ones in Gabon, for example, was we working with all these groups. We created the first law that really made it clear that the community groups would get a benefit, even when the trees were cut legally. They weren't getting any benefit a lot of the time. Right. So we created this law with them and the government so that even when things are legally done, you had nothing before, and now you actually join in the benefits. So you don't just lose the forest, But we saw the value of that and the need for that by working with these groups. So it's very much that, and it always has to be that way. Who wants somebody parachuting in,
But that, it's interesting, James, that you have this insight, which is something that has been developed more recently. It's, I think, maybe a testament to being open to learning and the work you've done is that, this isn't something you're just doing now, retrospectively, now that everyone's just like interested in not being colonial and doing diversity and all this kind of stuff. It feels like you have been having this mindset from the very beginning, and that I think really shows in the kind of work that you're doing and the way that you approach it, which is, as Ben said, really awe-inspiring and just so exciting to hear about. I wanna ask two last questions. So a lot of people we've spoken to have talked about the next 10 years as being this decisive decade, and I'm really curious to know for you, if everything goes right, what does 2030 look like? What kind of world are we living in?
Oh, it's a great question. And I think if it all goes right, what we're living in is a world in which we've made a lot of decisions about where we're going. And we've decided to change a lot of things. We won't have completed all of those changes, but we will have agreed as a community of people that we want our agriculture to be sustainable, for example, and that we want our electricity, all of our power to be renewable, and our cars to not be fossil fuel either. And we will have made these big shifts, and we will have done it with the consciousness that that doing these shifts are a way of delivering social justice, because you can use all of this. You're kind of re-engineering a lot of what we do as a culture, and if you do it consciously, you can also increase social justice by these changes. So I think that's what I'm looking to see, that we've understood some of these big architectural shifts that we need to make in the society, and we need to make them in such a way as to deliver social justice, and that we're on course to doing them.
The other question that we always ask is, if people are listening to this podcast and they've heard you talk, and I think that this is super important to ground this podcast, because this is like mind-blowing stuff that we're talking about. For the everyday person, for the Maryam or the Ben that's listening, at home, on the train, on their way to work, whatever they're doing, what they're hearing this and they're inspired by what you're saying, what can that person do as an individual?
Well, at the beginning, Ben, you were saying that everybody has an individual thing they can do, and I deeply believe that everybody's activities in this regard are equally important. Every individual's contribution is equally important. And so what can you do? Well, some examples. If you're a teacher, you can talk about these things and educate kids. Or if you're a parent. And if you're a kid, you can hold your parents to account. How much fun is that, right? You can demand they do the right thing. And if you are a member of a pension fund, as many people are, you can then write to your pension fund and demand that the investments of the pension fund are used to reduce climate change, not make climate change worse. And that's a powerful one, when the members of the pension fund write into the president and say, you've got to do this. And if you're an executive of a company, the thing to do is to say, okay, the company needs to have now a business plan that will reduce our carbon to zero by 2050 and by 50% by 2030, just like countries are doing under the Paris Agreement. So if you have anything to do with running a company, You need a Paris-compliant business plan. If you're a pension investor, tell them to invest in the right way. And if you're a kid, don't let your parents off the hook.
That was such a good answer. James, thank you so much.
Thank you, James.
And now, it's time for our climate confessions. Let's fess up to the bad habits we just can't kick.
Welcome to Climate Confessions. I know that you've all been missing your climate confessions for the week. So
Deeply.
we have worked super, super hard on these. I'm not going to make you go first, James, because I think it's fair for Ben to go first to give you an example of what we're looking for.
What? It's fair. Okay, it's my turn to go first.
It's your
today.
turn. So, and asterisk, if you don't know what climate confessions are, you can just go back to a previous episode
And listen, hear us out. Okay, so my climate confession this week is linked to recycling, which I believe is linked to climate change. And I think that this is something that we will explore at some point. But what I found out like maybe 2 or 3 days ago is that using the one-use only face masks, the PPE ones, is apparently really bad for the environment, and I didn't know that. I didn't know that that they're not like recyclable and stuff. So that's what I've been doing, and it's really bad. And I've been doing it for months and months, and I didn't realize. So now I don't know how I didn't realize that either. That's like my head's in the clouds. But now I'm gonna buy a reusable face mask because that is better for the environment.
Then I'll buy you a nice reusable face mask.
Thank you for Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Do we even do Christmas here? I don't know if that's okay. It's fine. No, never mind. James, it's your turn. What is your climate confession? What have you been doing that you shouldn't be doing?
Well, I've been wanting to bring all the best climate change cases in the world, and that's my confession really. And litigators are pretty competitive, and I like bringing good climate change cases. So, and some years ago, I said to my team, look, so we've got to bring a good case against a pension fund, because it's like a bank, this great bank robber, Willie Sutton in America, got out of Sing Sing prison, and they said, well, Willie, why did you rob all those banks? And he said, what do you mean, why did I rob all those banks? It's where the money is. That was pretty clear. So pension funds is where the money is, right? So I said, let's do a pension fund that isn't doing the right thing, And so we looked around, and we were beat by a guy in Australia who brought a good case against a pension fund, because it's not that easy to bring cases in the UK. My climate confession is that I was a little jealous that he got there first. Now, the good news is that it's a really good case, and he did a really great job. So, but I'm trying to loosen up.
Too competitive.
I love this. I love this.
Extreme sport.
Every time, each of our guests is so much more creative with their confession than Ben and I are. We're like, to use too much plastic.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jay. I like that. I feel like that was very personal, actually. Like a real true confession that had to do with just your outlook. I feel like now this one's not going to sound so important. And actually, I'm going to totally cheat this week. So I'm cheating because I was talking
Betrayal.
I know it's going to be a betrayal. So as you know, if you've listened to this podcast all the way through the end, we have like a great team that puts it together. And one of our team here on curation and research, Tara Cooper, you can listen for her name later. Tara's great. We were talking about this episode, and she said, I have the best climate confession. And
that's a mistake. Why did you admit it?
It was a mistake, Tara, because now I'm stealing it and crediting you. Not stealing it really, just crediting you for it. Because so Tara's great. She's like a vegan and all this kind of stuff, and like there's not that much, there's not that much just to confess about. But this one is so good, I couldn't like let it go. So basically, when Tara is feeling, let's just say, I'm going to say lazy, sad, stressed, overwhelmed, she will, instead of making coffee in her house or walking down the street like 2 minutes to get it, she will order it on Deliveroo.
Oh, Tara. Oh, that's so bad.
And
Even I wouldn't do that.
And I love it because it's so something I would do, but no one ever admits this to me, and I always feel bad. So now I feel like I have a partner in crime / I have not ordered coffee to the house yet. So
in climate crime.
Climate,
you order coffee online.
Potentially not an episode to admit climate crime on.
Yeah, well, litigation is an extreme sport, is what I've learned today.
James, but that is our. She has 2 coffee machines. It's excellent. The confessions are just coming. I love it. So I know that I owe you one, Ben, a confession, but this was just too good to give up.
No, I'm happy with that. That's a decent level of exposure.
I just want to say thank you, just a huge thank you, James, for talking to us, for the work that you do. I mean, I've been listening to us chat and thinking about the work you do and what I knew of it before. And what I realized, and I don't know, Ben, if you feel the same way, is, we've been talking to all these people who do this work out there and realizing that, yes, we can be hopeful, but there's still so much to be done. And what you don't always realize, or you don't know, is that there are people out there who are fighting on your behalf.
Right.
And what has just so become evident to me during this recording is that, James, you and your team are out there. We really are your client. You are out there fighting on our behalf, even when we don't know it, trying to bring about change to make our lives better at the end of the day, right? Mm-hmm. And I just think, I kind of had this idea, because I'm a big geek, I was like, it's like the legal avengers assembling around the world. But it's just amazing. And so I just wanted to say thank you, and thank you for taking the time to join us.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. You're amazing. The work that you're doing is amazing. And it's so important. Yeah. Wow.
Thank you both. It's incredibly important that people like me get to share it. So, Maryam, Ben, and Tara, the work you're doing is also equally important, is to get the message out there so that people can hear what's going on and feel empowered themselves and feel positive about it. And that way we do it all together, huh? So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Until next time. What's your line, Ben?
Oh, stay curious. Thanks for joining us this week. If you enjoyed what you listened to today, please rate and subscribe and share the episode with a curious friend. Join the conversation on socials using the hashtag ClimateCuriousPod and let us know what you want to hear about next time. You can find us online at TEDxLondon.
This podcast was made possible by TEDxLondon's headline partner, City. City is all about progress and supporting great ideas. And for the past 5 years, they've supported us to bring world-changing ideas to the TEDxLondon stage. Now they're taking it to the next level by supporting this new podcast. Thanks, City. This episode was produced by Josie Coulter, curation and research by Tara Cooper, engineered and mixed by Ben Beheshti, artwork designed by Sabrina Russo and Rebecca Mingus, music composed by Ben the Falcon Beheshti, presented by Maryam Pasha and Ben Hurst.
Thank you.